Hi, I'm Stacy Andersen, also known as the Supergene. Having lived in 9 cities across 3 continents and counting, Supergene Unleashed features people from around the world sharing their unfiltered versions of female empowerment. With a 20-year global career in digital marketing, operating as a leader and mentor, and now as a wife and mother of 3, I encourage you to unleash your own Supergene and become the most empowered version of yourself. Here's your advocate, ally, and confidant. I am ready to inspire you. Let's show the world what it's all about. Welcome back to another episode of Supergene Unleashed. Today, Anam Ahmad is joining us. I'm super excited about it because she is a self-proclaimed Zillennial. It's just on the cusp of Millennials and Gen Z. It really depends on who you ask. But more importantly, she's also the founder and chief creative officer for The Hanging House, which is one of the Middle East's most disruptive experiential agencies. In fact, she actually started her career at quite a young age, at the age of 17, and she launched The Hanging House at 21, which is pretty remarkable. So, Anam, welcome to the show. And first of all, can you please tell all the listeners a bit about your background and how you were so young when you started your career and what exactly happened?
Hi, Stacey. Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's really fun to be here, and I'm excited to delve into our conversations, going into my background. So as I was growing up, I was the kind of individual that honestly wanted to do a little bit of everything. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to work with animals. There was just a bunch of different things that I wanted to do growing up. At some point, it was a columnist. At some point, I wanted to be an author. Writing was really a passion of mine, and talking to people and uncovering stories. So journalism is probably what stuck with me. And that's what I actually intended to go to school for. I actually joined Murdoch University in Dubai and ended up leaving after a month. This was due to a few different reasons, actually.
Wait, really quickly, you were born and raised in Dubai then?
I'm born and raised in Dubai. I consider it home. My family's been around for generations over here. And from an ethnic perspective, I am Indian. I also have roots in Yemen. However, born and raised in Dubai, and you can call me that Dubai baby.
Exactly. Fast forward again to where you were at, about that you had started school and 1 month in, you were saying?
Yeah, that was, I'd say, a combination of things. It was also around the time where the world, I would say, was going through a financial crisis. My father ended up losing his job. There was a bunch of different things that were happening at the same time. And my parents told me that if you are going to pursue what you need to, maybe you can look at other options that might work out better. And I said, no, if it is, I'm going to go to Murdoch and I'm going to do this myself. That's what it's going to be. And I was really stubborn about it, or determined, depending on how you want to see it. So I ended up in Murdoch, but then very quickly realized that I couldn't imagine doing the same thing for 4 years straight.
In terms of going to school and having this structured class thing, but you grew up going to school, right? What was so different about it?
School was one of those things that, you're a kid. Your parents are still sort of dictating what it means to be like and what it means for you to go to school. And I feel like when you're going to college, you're a little bit more independent in a way, where you're also have a better understanding of who you are and what you're looking for. And high school throughout was something for me that I was like, okay, this is something that I'm just kind of doing because it's something that I need to be done. But I then started thinking about, do I go start volunteering abroad? How do I get out of this little bubble that sort of I'm in? And I think once I got to university, I said, you know what? I think there's a choice. I don't necessarily have to do what everyone else is doing, just because there's this societal sort of expectations of what progression means as an individual. You go to school, you then get your degree, you then find your job. Do I really need to be fitting into that box?
Oh, for sure. And it's interesting to hear your take on it because, obviously I grew up in the US and this is very much the system. And so it's quite interesting to hear that this system is kind of borderless in a sense, and that irrespective of where you grow up, you still feel this inclination to follow this path. So basically in college, you finally felt the authority that you don't need to follow this path. You can create a different path.
That's right.
And you were 17 when you uncovered this truth.
That's true.
Quite a mature way of thinking for 17, you know?
Oh, thank you.
Or maybe this is part of the Gen Z aspect that I don't really know about, because maybe now the Gen Zers are more mindful in this particular way.
To be honest with you, when I interact with the younger audience today, where they're even younger, the true Gen Zs, or even the Gen Alpha for that matter, they blow my mind. And I think that this is just a matter of exposure, because I think growing up, you have the internet literally at the tips of your fingers and you're exposed to such a much wider world, which then means that you are not necessarily restricted to a certain way of thinking. And I think that this generation is now able to sort of form their own opinions and much faster than others.
They're able to take in the information, filter it, process it, and figure out their own kind of observations from it. So what really happened though when you were 17 and you, 1 month in, and decided, okay, that's it, I can't do it?
Yeah, so I said, you know what? Like you said, this is it. Let's see what else is out there for me, right? So I ended up dropping out and I then got my first job. So I did a bunch of different sort of odd jobs, but it eventually led me to saying, okay, now I feel I'm ready for pursuing or furthering my education, because I'm not necessarily opposed to learning. I think it might be really the format that you're learning in.
Right. The structuration and the organization of the system as it exists was not really your forte, which, by the way, I think is going to be heavily disrupted with AI. I think it'll be incredibly interesting to see how it evolves and how university, college, the whole thing evolves with AI. I feel the need for such long duration to learn specific vocations is probably no longer needed. So then are you saying you went back to school after this mishmash of different jobs and journeys?
Yeah. I was still keen on my journalism pursuit, I'd say, and I ended up coming across a 1-year diploma program for journalism. And I said, you know what, this is something that I could be interested in. It's something that gives me that autonomy to continue working. It's not necessarily structured hours in school where you're spending all day and then that's kind of all that you're really doing. It was a bit more hands-on and involved. And I said, okay, let's go back to that. So I ended up going to the EMDI Institute and speaking to a sort of a course coordinator at the time. And then at the end of our discussion, we ended up with saying, you know what, we also have this other program in event management and innovative marketing. You're a people person. You're great. You're so much fun. Is this something that you'd be interested to pursue? And I said, it sounds interesting. Why not go out of my comfort zone and explore that? And that somehow I actually ended up within that experiential field, really, because that was my hands-on course into event management, innovative marketing. We were put on loads of events over the course of the program, which was a year long. And through that, I kind of discovered my passion in creating these experiences or live spaces that people actually interact with each other, and I get to get real-time feedback on how are they actually feeling about it. And I actually discovered that creating these experiences is also a form of storytelling. So I'm still kind of tapping into my passion for telling stories, my passion for being able to interact with people, but just through a different light. So I think the initial idea of going into journalism just translated differently, but still worked out.
Absolutely. I want to tap into more of the psychology behind some of these things, because I'm curious to hear about how you felt in the moment of dropping out and how was maybe perceived, or if you feel like you faced any outside judgment, because a lot of times, especially women, associate their identity with their career path. And their career path is largely set out for them based on what they study in college. And in fact, many companies initially do right now care about that. So how did you feel, and what were some of the life lessons that you learned, and ultimately knowing that maybe there is someone out there who's listening, who's contemplating the same decision, but is a little bit afraid because society has this precedent of following a specific path, and you went against the path. And now it's great to see that you're out on the other side as a success story. But reflecting back, what were some of those feelings and thoughts going through your head? And what are some of the life lessons? Because I'm positive that you don't regret the decision, but what can you share with us on a little bit deeper level about that?
Oh, 100%. So I can tell you that that point in my life was probably one of the most conflicted times that I've ever had. On one side, I've always been very blessed with parents who have been extremely supportive of my decisions. My father, my mother, both of them have always been believers of, okay, let her figure it out herself. We're here to support, but we're also not going to dictate her decisions. In that moment, I appreciated the autonomy of being able to make those decisions. I do have to say that there was definitely an education process that we also had to go through. I think it was sitting down with my parents and having those conversations and telling them that it's not about what society wants, but I would really thrive in a space where I'm able to be me and be able to figure it out. And if I fail, that's on me, and I'll pick back up and let's go.
So you truly listened to your heart, and your heart was telling you that this is the way to go. And whatever it took, even convincing that ray of doubt maybe coming from your parents. But at the same time, it's great to hear that they were so flexible. But what about your peers? Was there judgment coming from your peers?
That was definitely a difficult one as well. I'd say humans are also programmed to have a sort of herd mentality, right? So I was that one person out of all my friends that suddenly dropped out of school, that's suddenly doing odd jobs at like promoting bleach at a supermarket. I definitely got a lot of questions from my friends. They were like, now what are you doing? What do you really want to do? In that moment, I felt very scared because it was very daunting to be the only one that was doing something different. And you see your peers that have gone off to college and they're living their best college life, right? So they're hanging out, they've got their friends, they've got a routine in place, which looked very different to mine. It made me feel like I was sort of that outcast, and I didn't necessarily have something to connect with my friends on. But what I did also know in that moment was that it's okay to be different. It's okay to not do what everyone else is doing, and you'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's an extremely beautiful message, because oftentimes people are afraid to be different. They are afraid to stand out. And I especially find this true amongst women. And I especially find this true after having lived a bit in the Middle East for about 9 years now. The way that genders are perceived, especially in different cultures, can be tricky to navigate. So would you say that despite this, having that courage to be different obviously is something that I would presume has motivated you to also give you the strength to start a company?
For sure.
Right? And I believe that you have mentioned to me before, obviously not on today's show yet, but I think you founded the company with a fellow man. Is that right?
That's right.
How did this come about, and how did your partnership form? And do you feel like equals in this? Because one thing that can also be tricky to navigate is mixing friends and business. So I'm curious to hear if you guys were friends. Can you walk us through this a little bit?
Sure. And I just wanted to kind of touch on your point a little bit about also how it's especially true for women, where we feel like we're a little bit more afraid to maybe stand out or be different. I think to that point, I agree. And I think that also has to do with a lot of societal conditioning, but it's really important to stay authentic to who you are, whether that's you as a college dropout, whether that's you as someone who has finished their degree in a certain area of expertise, but have then decided that now, no, I want to do something else. I think it's just as long as you're staying authentic to who you truly are, I think that comes across to the people that you then interact with. And it's almost like life kind of carves its path for you in that sense, right? So that's kind of what happened with me as well. And just that backlash that I got from peers and even mentors at the time, to be honest, about, hey, what are you up to? How does this really make sense? Like, what do you mean you're not going to get a degree? That actually fueled my passion or my drive to then say, let me actually show them that I can be right.
Yeah, that you can come out on the other side stronger. I mean, by the way, there are many people who have been extremely successful starting massive companies that also dropped out. And I think, especially now, again, in the wake of AI, I think it's going to be something that's more common. But good on you to take that bold risk and stay with it and almost use that as ammunition to motivate you that there is no other option but success.
That's true. And that's the mindset that I went in with, or I entered my 20s with. Hussam, my co-founder, and I actually met at EMDI, which is the events program that I was pursuing for a year. That's actually where we met. Funny enough, we started off on a group project where we argued a lot. And then by the end of the year, we were on another group project and we'd become really good friends. And what worked really well is that there was mutual respect. So we both sort of have our domains of expertise. At the time, Hussam was actually working at a bank and he was doing this course part-time. So he comes from a finance background. He's a business analyst, and we were able to sort of balance each other out in that sense while still maintaining true sort of respect for each other's areas of expertise. We obviously think in very different ways, which is where the initial arguments came from. But then we sort of started to understand that both of our areas of expertise could be complementary, and what happens when both those come together. How do we kind of take it from there? So after we met at the program, obviously we became good friends and kind of stayed from there. And it was only after, I'd say, about 4 years or so of knowing each other did we fully truly understand that, okay, we're both have respect. And I know I say this a lot, but it really is absolutely crucial for any sort of partnership for you to then know that, okay, we are equals, we are partners, because this is the area that you really add value to, and this is the area that I really add value to. And being able to bring those two sort of domains together was, I think, what really worked out. I have attempted to explore business ventures with other friends, but it hasn't worked out as well. And I think I can't stress enough how important it is to have a strong partnership when you're going into a business. And it really just fundamentally comes down to whether there is a mutual understanding of areas of expertise and whether there's that mutual sort of respect towards each other and having that core voice.
Yeah. It's foundational if you're going to start a business with somebody else. First of all, you guys are really the yin and the yang. You guys came to an understanding that, okay, you're the expert in this, I'm the expert in that, and you respected that boundary. I'm quite fascinated that this was able to happen in a male-female dynamic, because in my experience, I haven't necessarily seen too many success stories like this, because my exposure points, there can be a little bit more of competition between the two parties, and somebody maybe not being able to accept that the other person knows more than they do, because they might want to have a little bit more control. So it really sounds like you found the perfect person in terms of somebody who isn't after, who can manage that control, but you're equally that way. And I think that this is a really important finding and lesson and piece of advice to anybody who's starting a business with somebody else, be it another man or a woman. But generally speaking, I've seen or encountered more situations with men where when I have tried to demonstrate expertise in a particular area, it was not always easy for them to accept me as the expert. I think it's really wonderful to hear that you guys were able to find this balance and form this partnership. And I mean, now obviously it's been 9 years since you've started the company and you've grown quite a lot. So in the course of this time, have you guys always stayed true to having that mutual respect?
100%. And I do owe a lot to Hussam. I mean, look, I don't want to glorify a behavior that should be the norm, but at the same time, I do have a lot of respect for him as an individual because I think with men, I think it usually becomes about an ego game, right? And I think he's always been that person that has been sort of self-assured and comfortable in his own area of expertise where he doesn't feel threatened by someone else. And I think that's really important too, to find a partner or a man. And I feel like we're kind of going into like even personal territory over here a little bit, which is great, but just being able to sort of have a partnership with an individual who is sure of themselves and is not sort of insecure in a manner that maybe then you doing better than them can kind of like ruffle some feathers, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I want to highlight what you said about that you don't want to glorify something that should be the norm. And I completely agree with you. But it is an unfortunate truth that more often than not, what you're experiencing isn't the norm. So if you had to offer some wisdom to any other fellow female business owner who's working side by side with a man who isn't experiencing what you're experiencing, do you have any tips or tactics for how someone can try to, I guess, bring more balance into getting more mutual respect?
Yeah, I've definitely learned to name the behavior when I see it.
What do you mean? Like facing things head on or calling it out?
Oh yeah, calling it out. Definitely do it in a respectful manner, or even sometimes kind of getting them to notice that they're acting that way, because a lot of times they don't. And as I mentioned, I mean, this is something that I've honestly been fortunate enough to not face as a challenge with my business partner. But this is definitely not some sort of major challenges as a woman in business, or at least not in the ways you would typically expect. But I've definitely felt it in sort of subtler kind of dynamics when I give maybe direct feedback. And, it can seem as harsh, whereas when my co-founder gives it, it's a little bit more taken as leadership. So it's in these sort of moments that I've then learned to navigate that it's almost like it's this really quiet bias that people are working with, and they don't necessarily recognize that, right? So being able to bring attention to their behavior really helps.
Well, because the person has to be ready to hear it.
That's true.
We don't like to hear things about our behavior unless we're able to accept it. So it's a really smart way to try and make the person see it for themselves, because then that instigates greater change in the person. And it also is fueled by them gaining a little bit more empathy.
That's right. And it could be even as subtle as staying quiet and letting them process what they've said out loud. You could just kind of sit there and just look at them and be like, okay.
My dad once told me that sometimes in business, less is more, and to just force the other person to speak.
Yeah.
And I remember one time he in particularly told me, don't say a word. He was like, I don't care if a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes pass. If you're the first person to speak, you lose. It was in negotiation. That I was like, wow, okay. That might be hard for me, but
I I mean, there are those really awkward pauses, right? But you just kind of want to sit with them and you're like, it's okay. This has worked. I would say maybe 8 times out of 10, where you just sit there and, once they've said something that doesn't sit right with you or you're not comfortable with, just let them sit with that, right? Let them kind of process what is it that actually they said. And a lot of times they would actually correct themselves. And if not, you can even just say something like, oh, I'm sure you didn't intend that to come out like that, right? Or something that just kind of addresses the behavior, but isn't necessarily kind of putting them on the spot that way, but just gets them to maybe introspect a little bit.
For sure. Giving any kind of a feedback is always a delicate situation, especially if it is a woman giving feedback to a man about how he is behaving in a particular situation. You were fringing in this whole thing about relationships. And I mean, you kind of were describing your business partner of having this mutual respect and how that should transcend into relationships. Has it transcended into relationships for you? Like when it comes to dating and any of these things, do you face struggles?
100%. Here I am, extremely single. Look, I do have to say that I've come across some wonderful men, and exactly what I was saying about my business partner, I think also then applies to any man that you're aiming to have a relationship with. It could even extend into friendships. But from a dating perspective, I would say that it has been incredibly difficult to find a man that is not intimidated by where I am in life, right? Or what I do for a living. So I think it's really important to find someone who can also hold space for you and let you be you. And this goes back to kind of being your authentic self and being true to who you really are, because in that way, when you're being true to yourself, you're saying, this is who I am. Do not shrink yourself. I think as women, when we go out on dates and stuff, and obviously generally everyone wants to impress the other person, right? That's kind of your go-to. That's exactly what you want to do. You want to impress the other person, but I think being mindful that while you're trying to impress the other person, you don't lessen yourself. You still show up as your full true self, because that's eventually going to come out. And within the first few dates, if you can see that this man can hold space for you, then that works out. And if they don't, that's a pretty telling sign that that shouldn't be sort of going anywhere, right? I can't say I've been very successful in a relationship because I sit single today. However,
but you seem very pragmatic with your approach.
I think it's balance, right? I think it's being able to sort of really tap into your femininity and sort of say that, okay, this is what it is. I had a recent conversation that I was actually having with a friend of mine. I was talking about how I would like to think that a man would see the fact that I've nurtured a business for all these sort of years. That definitely means that there is that nurturing sort of quality within me. And that then can also extend to relationships. Because there is, I think, this misconception that women in power are too masculine, or, they're not necessarily bringing in that sort of softer side that a man might want in a relationship. And I think that those two are not necessarily mutually exclusive. It can be one thing. How do you come up to a woman and say, oh, you're not woman enough? Well, that doesn't make sense, right? Because that's fundamentally who I am. It's just really being about how you want to sort of perceive that, how the other party sort of perceives that.
The thing is for me, obviously I think 10 years older than you, and I am married now, and I have met that person. I've been a strong and independent woman. And you're saying many life lessons that are so important for women to grip into. And that's first and foremost, be you. You should not change you for a relationship, because, like you rightfully said, at some point in time, that will reveal itself. And it's just not very sustainable to show up day in, day out, not being you. And then the second thing is about being a successful woman and having that independence. I don't think women should feel bad about that. And it's kind of a bit of a different take that I had in my single days. My vantage point was, well, I can't understand why a man wouldn't want this successful woman like me. I mean, I thought that I was the catch of all catches, that I am independent. I have traveled. I have my own money. I don't need your money. I don't need you to buy me a drink or to buy me dinner. I can be an equal contributor. I thought that that would be the most attractive thing, yet it did take me a long time to find the right person who appreciated that. And I think I spent many years going through those lessons because I met men who actually didn't appreciate that. They didn't want that, because at the end of the day, and what I have come to conclude is that unfortunately it must have triggered something in them whereby it destabilized their confidence. It destabilized their ego, and it destabilized their pride. And that was something that they couldn't overcome to accept the type of person that I was. Now, fortunately, I have 100% found the man that has fully embraced that. I'm also really glad that I never changed who I was for somebody else, because I can certainly tell you several years into a marriage and raising a family that if you are not you, you will struggle, because you face so many things in life. And when you're in a relationship, you're going to face it together. And so if you notice when you're dating that there are small things that you can't overcome, well, these are just going to be magnified in a more serious relationship, because they don't hold a candle to what you're going to experience 5 years down the line. My question to you is, having this wisdom and inner confidence, does it help you kind of quickly disseminate if it's right or if it's wrong? And although you haven't really met the right person, does it help you, I guess, get less emotionally attached? Because that can be another thing as women to navigate, is because despite our hard exterior and our boss lady selves, we have an emotional side, and we in relationships really get clouded by that emotional side.
Yeah, I can 100% say that it has taken a while to get here. There's been a few instances. Look, there's definitely been a time where I would go out on dates, or I've been in a relationship where I felt like I minimized myself, and that didn't end well.
Yeah. And it probably didn't make you feel good.
No, because you're not being you. And if you don't have that space to be yourself, it's going to go nowhere. No one's going to be happy because you're not really bringing in your full authentic self. So which then means that you're not really fully connecting with your partner. It's a downward sort of spiral from there. So as I would say, I've gotten, with a bit more experience, and as I've gotten older, I have also started to pay more attention to those little, I think what our generation likes to call red flags, right? So when they're sort of popping up, don't run towards them like that's a carnival. Like, let's look at those and actually see, what does that mean? How would that translate into something longer term? Like you said, how would that magnify?
When I was younger, I had a male friend who was much older, and one of the best pieces of advice that he ever gave me was, you want to know how a man feels about you, Stacy? Do nothing. Literally, he said, do nothing. Sit back and observe, and his actions will tell you everything that you need to know about how he feels about you. And I think that that can really be so true in so many situations, because oftentimes women have a tendency to overanalyze and also make excuses for behavior that shouldn't be excused away, especially in this day and age with how easy it is to get in touch with somebody. I mean, it has never, ever been easier to communicate with somebody else than it is right now.
Yeah, that's great advice from your friend.
Yeah.
I'm going to take that on board and
do nothing.
Keep it in the back pocket. Yeah, for sure. But I'd like to say that it's definitely taken me quite a bit to kind of get to where I am and be so sure of myself where I'm saying, this is who I am. You accept the full package. I'm not going to minimize certain aspects of myself because that would make you feel more at ease, sir. That's not what we're here for. If anything, you can appreciate what I bring to the table. And if that's how it is, then yes, let's continue chatting. And I know we're kind of going back into work territory a little bit, but the idea is that, like, when we were talking about sort of naming the behavior and being able to kind of just getting them to introspect, right, about what it is that they're doing, I think that applies to also then personal relationships and that same sort of tactic.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have to be a little bit careful with that so that you don't fall into the potential slippery slope of thinking that you can change somebody else, because fundamentally you cannot. And a lot of core qualities need to be there, in my opinion, to make it successful. I think this is such a great place to leave it. Thank you so much, Anam, for giving us a sneak peek into the Zillennial mindset with your journey with school, with business, and especially with dating. I really appreciate that you are able to articulate so clearly your passion for maintaining true to yourself. And I think that that's really the key takeaway, but also your motivation of dare to be different and not to be afraid to take a leap of faith to do something different, because you are living proof that you can succeed, and that bold step can actually propel you into something so wonderful.
Thank you. I've never been one to fit into any boxes. And I've always been sort of that believer of let your work, let your results speak louder than sort of the labels or the words or anything else of that sort, right? I think that's ultimately what it kind of really comes down to as well. When you have the courage to be yourself, the results speak for themselves.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what Supergene Unleashed is all about. So thank you so much for taking the time. Please tell everybody, if they want to connect with you, what is the best place to find you?
LinkedIn's definitely the best place. I'm very responsive there. I'm happy to connect with anyone. You can find me at Anam Ahmad on LinkedIn, and I am associated with the Hanging House. So that's me.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I hope you feel empowered from the episode. You can connect with me at supergeneunleashed.com and on Instagram at supergeneunleashed. Please share your thoughts, and I look forward to connecting with you. And until next time, keep on shining and showing the world your Supergene.